Hello, this is Virtualis Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. So what is the center game? Well, it comes after e4, e5, and white playing d4, immediately attacking the center. And basically, the logic here is that it is very common and entirely expected that black will capture back, which is what I did in this game. And potentially, you've deflected the opponent's pawn from the center. Now here, white has a couple of options, and most commonly what I've seen, because I don't play the center game, but so I usually face against it as black. What I've seen white will do would be to capture the pawn with the queen, which isn't necessarily the best move because black now has the response, which is a very natural developing move, develop knight to c6, which attacks the queen and basically black wins some tempo. Very commonly, as in this game, the opponent sort of retreats the queen all the way to d1. That probably isn't the best move for white. And in fact, if we look at the Lee chess database, in this position, black has a bit of an overall advantage, win advantage over white. So some other options, if you want to be a center game player, is to bring the queen to e3, which I think is known as the Paulson attack. So this is okay, I think reasonably good for white, and I think in sort of a beginner intermediate games, sort of black and white are mostly equal. One of the other options is also queen to a4, and again, black and white here are mostly equal. Now, here, white has another option as well, which is to play c3, the beginning of the Danish gambit. And you think, why is white, gambiting yet another pawn? Now, the logic here is, let's say black takes. Here, you can play bishop to c4, gambiting yet another pawn. And if they take a second time, you capture back. And look at what's happened. Black has no development whatsoever, and white, they've lost a few pawns, but now the sort of the diagonal pieces have, potentially full control of the board, and this massive advantage in development can be potentially very, very winning for white. And in fact, this line of the Danish gambit, so if you remember, starting with c3 after black captures the pawn on d4, white here, again, according to sort of Lee chess database, white has a substantial win advantage over black. So if you play the center game, playing the Danish gambit is probably a very, very good approach. Or if you capture back with queen, then consider playing the Paulson attack with the queen back to e3. Now, obviously for black, what should I do for black? Because I don't play the center game. So if white plays the Danish gambit, black, in fact, should decline the gambit. Don't go greedy, chasing these pawns. The whole idea here is deflecting your control of the center. So the best moves here for black is either to immediately play d5, challenging the center, or you could play queen e7, and here again, immediately challenging the center. So those two moves are actually the best moves against the Danish gambit. Now, before we sort of move any further forward, so in this game, the opponent did capture, and we sort of got back to this position. Let's have a look at the review. All right, so in this game, I played potentially played very, very accurately, though, it's often easy to play accurately when there are some obvious moves. And this is potentially part of the problem with the center game. The center game, unless you're playing some of those tricky lines, for black, some of the best moves are reasonably obvious, natural looking moves. And here I managed to capture a very substantial advantage right out of the opening, and we'll see that in context. We'll see what happened. All right, so from this position, what I opted to do was that I was going to immediately attack that weak pawn on f2. So the f pawn is the only piece that's only defended by the king at the beginning of the game, which makes it a very, very good target. The opponent plays c3, which probably wasn't the most accurate move. You can see -1, blocks in sort of the natural development square of the knight. Continuing on to the theme of the attack on the f pawn, and now setting myself up for something that looks a bit like a reverse scholar's mate. And this is, was still very good for me. And the opponent now has to play very, very carefully. And one of the things, of course, in sort of beginning intermediate games is once you put a queen, need the king. Obviously there's some potential trickiness here. They can't sort of defend that pawn because, of course, that pawn is pinned. And if they try to attack, again, that's very, very bad because they will lose their rook. So there is some trickiness here. And my opponent probably didn't play the most accurate move, queen f3, because, again, one of the things with that loss of tempo is I've got much more development than my opponent. So now knight e5 with an attack on the queen. So, Stockfish reckons putting the queen back, but here I thought might as well go on the aggro, and the opponent makes a wrong move. So g3 is almost always an error when you're in this sort of setup, because particularly in this one, so the opponent was looking at sort of counter-attacking, but it doesn't work because this comes with check. So check, they go capture back, but now the opponent has straight up lost a queen. And from this point, really, all I was going to do was just to make sure I don't stuff something up. So bishop e2, that makes sense. Let's try to take the center, d5. They develop the knight, bd2, that makes sense. Let's move the queen out of the way. So here I thought, but continue with some pressure, here. Potentially, lining up that diagonal looked good as well. They sort of short castles, which I think probably makes sense. But, the position is quite weak, and particularly sort of these light square diagonals. Develop another piece. Now, this was a good move. So, if I'm not careful, there's a discovered check here, and then I'll be losing my queen. So I need to either block that file, or more likely just move the king out of the way. So short castles, there is now no attack. Opponent tries to attack the bishop. That makes sense. Let's move it back. I want to keep sort of the vision on that f2 pawn. They want to sort of keep pushing to attack, but now I've got another move, another attacker now on the on that f2 pawn, and pretty much it's all lost for the opponent because that comes with check with a fork, so that rook is lost. Opponent probably didn't move the king to the right place, so captures. That doesn't work because that now comes with check. And here the opponent actually opted to resign because it's a mate in 2. Why is it a mate in 2? Well, that is defended. So check, opponent is forced to move the king to only one possible square, and here that is checkmate. So your opponent sort of saw the writing on the wall here, opted to resign. Good game, GG. There are 2 big takeaways from this game. 1, if you play the center game as white, it's tricky and you'll need to learn some theory. And 2, if you play against the center game as black, decline the Danish gambit if it is offered. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.